Good afternoon. I am calling to order our regularly scheduled meeting of the Intergovernmental Relations Committee. We have two items on our agenda, and the first is a presentation regarding the Federal Clean Power Plan. And as part of this, we would be adopting support for the new Federal Environmental Protection Agency's Clean Power Plan rules as part of our 2016 federal legislative agenda, and directing the city attorney with assistance from the Sustainability Office to coordinate with the city's role in defending the Clean Power Plan, including authorization to file or participate in the filing of an amicus brief supporting the EPA's Clean Power Plan rules or take other legal action appropriate to participate in defending the legality of these rules. So I think our presenter here is Ms. Prest.
Good afternoon, Chair Glidden. My name is Gail Prest. I'm the Sustainability Director with the City of Minneapolis, and thank you for this opportunity. It's pretty consistent with what the city's done in the past, but I just want to briefly talk about the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency's new Clean Power Plan rules and a role that the city can play. As Councilmember Glidden mentioned, here's the requested action. And I think to the first bullet, we do want to make one tiny amendment to the language that we're proposing. But just a little bit of background. On October 3rd this year, President Obama and the EPA actually announced their new Clean Power Plan rules. These rules were in discussion for years. There were lots of comments taken. There were proposed rules, but the final rules came out. And this is a really important step for the U.S. In reducing carbon pollution from the biggest source, that's electric power plants. I think the EPA estimates that 1/3 of greenhouse gas emissions come from electricity from power plants. So this is a really great opportunity for the city to meet our climate change goals, which are 80% by 2050, and also work on state issues as well. Basically, what the rules do is every state has carbon goals that they have to meet. And for Minnesota, it's 40%. And so then the states all have to develop their plans. So I think the way that the feds put it together is that it's consistent nationally, there's accountability, there's a really clear idea on what counts and what doesn't, and it kind of tries to level the playing field for each state's energy mix. Also, just a reminder, I think all council members earlier this year actually signed on to a letter to Governor Dayton urging him to support the new carbon rules and to work on developing a really robust state climate clean power plan. So this is actually consistent with that action as well. I think why we want to do this is, like I mentioned before, obviously we want the city to meet our greenhouse gas emission goals, and since electricity is a big part of that, this is a easy step that we can take. I think reducing coal plants obviously will clean up our air. It provides a chance for to create green jobs and the green economy, which Councilmember Glidden and others have worked on real strongly in the past few years. And I think it's also to remember that one of the reasons we're really interested in greenhouse gas emissions is to reduce the effects of adapting to this change in climate. In Minnesota, we know that our most severe rains are now 31% stronger than they were just a few decades ago. So the more that we can reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, the less likelihood we'll have of such catastrophic effects like flooding and heating. So the next steps we have are to really start looking at the state's clean power plan and what that process looks like. Staff have been participating in stakeholder meetings and briefings already on that. But what we're here today to do is to talk about the federal clean power plan. Litigation has already started, and it actually will ramp up in the next 30 days. And so I think Minneapolis, along with a lot of other kind of cutting edge cities across the U.S. have been asked to join a group of states and other cities led by the city or state of New York in supporting the EPA's action. Corey Conover from the Attorney's Office and I have been participating in a couple of calls, and Corey can talk more about what that might actually mean, but we think that there's a way to do it that will not take up a lot of staff resources. I'd like to quickly go over the proposed revisions to the federal policy and request one amendment. And I think that was the second attachment there. So basically, we're just adding language that talks about the city adopting our target of 80% by greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. We're talking about the EPA and President Obama's new goals for power plants. We're adding not just that this is our agenda for Congress, but also for federal agencies, since this clean power plan won't go to Congress. This is all done at the agency level. And supporting not just clean energy resources, but making clear that when we talk about clean energy resources, we're also talking about energy efficiency. So under the Clean Power Plan, it's all about moving away from coal, but it's also about energy efficiency and renewable energy as well. And then finally, it's making clear in the recommendation that we support adopting standards to limit carbon emissions from, and this is the one word we need to add, we want to add the word existing, and then also have new, modified, or reconstructed power plants. And that's
So, and I apologize, Ms. Prest, I actually don't have that letter in front of me and I'm having
Okay.
trouble with my computer. So is that an attached letter that you're suggesting to send? Because our action here is just adopting support for the Clean Power Plan rules as part of our federal legislative agenda. Was that language that's in the federal legislative agenda suggestion?
yeah,
Okay,
that's
all right, then we will, did folks understand the amendment that Ms. Prest suggested? And colleagues? All right. Then I will go ahead. Is there more to your presentation?
No.
Okay. Then what I will do then is I will go ahead and move approval of this item, which has the two parts, with the slight change that Ms. Prest has suggested to the wording that would appear in our 2016 federal legislative agenda, and ask if there is any discussion. Seeing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? And that item is approved.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much.
Madam Chair and committee members, good afternoon. I'm Melissa Lesh with Intergovernmental Relations Office, and I'm just going to be doing a really quick update about where we are with our capital investment and bonding process for the 2016 legislative session. As you know, we're going to be hosting a series of tours, and we completed our second tour just yesterday. Back in September, we hosted the Commissioner of Management and Budget and his staff for a day-long tour of Minneapolis and Minneapolis Park Board projects. Just yesterday, we hosted the House Capital Investment Committee. The chair and several members, along with a lot of members of the Minneapolis delegation, attended the tour. So I'd like to thank them for joining, and several staff as well. Yesterday, they started the tour at the University of Minnesota, seeing some projects there first thing in the morning, and then proceeded on to Hennepin County projects, some Minneapolis ones, and then Minneapolis Park and Rec Board. So it's been a good couple of tours. We have one more tour coming up December 15th is the penciled in date. Nothing's locked in yet, but I expect it will be December 15th that we'll be hosting the Senate tour. And tomorrow is the due date for final submission for our projects to Minnesota Management and Budget. And so I would definitely like to thank all of the staff at the city, staff in the fire department, CPAD and Public Works, all of whom work very hard to get these projects ready for submission to MMB, and we are ready to go. So with that, Madam Chair, if there are any questions, I will await questions.
Not seeing any questions?
Thank you.
Ms. Olson.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, council members. Lauren Olson, Government Relations Representative. I'm here just to give you a couple updates related to airport issues. This committee has followed very closely the trajectory of the long-term comprehensive plan for Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport, including a report you got from Metropolitan Airport Commission staff back in July. As you know, soon thereafter, there was a surprise for all of us when the FAA announced that they were going to suspend certain types of procedures at the airport due to some concerns that they needed to kind of enhance procedures for better safety. So that was a surprise, and it necessarily meant that we were going to see a change in operations at the airport and the way that runways were used. And since the way that runways are used is a critical concern to our residents, it determines where the noise is going to be. We expressed concern that we really needed to know what the impact was going to be before we could kind of engage the public appropriately on the plan. So we expressed these concerns to the Metropolitan Airports Commission. A subcommittee considered the issue on September 8th, and the subcommittee at that time voted to proceed with the plan and not delay it. But they did want staff to explore what could be done to address our concerns, including extending the comment period, or that was the idea at the time. After that meeting, I think there was some more discussion that happened behind the scenes about what would really address the issue, and I think there was some understanding that what we were asking for was a prudent request. So on September 21st, the MAC Commission actually got a recommendation from their staff to delay the plan until the new procedures were in place and could be studied. So the FAA is about to conclude their 60-day period examining the new flight procedures. And then after that, MAC wants to collect data for a couple months. So by the end of this month, the 60-day period should conclude. And that was the FAA's time to determine if the changes would work for them operationally. It turned out what they're exploring doing is not drastically different from what had been done before. It's just that their capacity was somewhat reduced because they are going to go back to using those two runways together. It's just that they have to allow a lot more time in between flights. So there may be some patterns that resemble what we've seen in the past, but until late August, we really had no idea what was going to result from the runway suspension and changes. So it was a prudent action to wait to study these impacts, and then that way we can engage the public on this issue. So this means that the schedule has changed. Originally, the public was expected to be engaged this fall, but at this point, with the collecting data for a couple months and producing new noise contours, the comment period will now be in the spring, and potential adoption of the plan will then be in the summer, potentially in June. So that's an update on that. Are there any questions about the status of the long-term comp plan?
No.
Then I'll just briefly mention that the FAA reauthorization bill, it was due to be reauthorized. It was going to expire on September 30th. Congress took action to extend the authority of the FAA until March of 2016. There seems to be a belief that they might be ready to actually take more permanent action in March rather than another extension. A key issue that we're following in this process is there's a robust discussion about the status of the FAA and air traffic control and kind of the type of body that they are, and whether or not to consider a different type of entity that might be more independent from things like budget swings and other influences. For some people, part of the reasoning behind that is that they want to expedite implementation of performance-based navigation and next-gen, and apparently having too much federal oversight is seen as a barrier, or too much input from basically our representatives in Congress. So this is a concern for us because we want to make sure that we continue to have a voice for people affected by these procedures. So that might be going in the wrong direction. So that's something that we're going to follow closely going forward. Any questions?
I don't see any.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Ranieri.
Madam Chair, that covers the things we'd like to cover today, and if there's any questions, we'll stand for any questions.
All right. I'm not seeing any, so thank you very much, and thank you for all the work on the various projects, including, of course, the bonding tour that happened recently. Did you want to say something else, Mr. Ranieri?
Madam Chair, the next couple of meetings, we'd like to bring in some discussion about 2016 legislative agenda, and probably in the beginning of the year, some amendments to the federal agenda. So
Okay.
okay.
All right. Thank you very much. With that, I believe we have concluded with our agenda for today, and we are adjourned. Thank you very much.